Hello, beautiful souls. I am Valeria Maritza at Healing Through You. I am an infinite being of light, and so are you. I am so excited to bring you today an interview with Jessica. She is a psychic medium, and one of the reasons that I'm so excited to bring her story forward is that when I started this podcast, it was all about empowering you, all about showing you where it is that you have this secret powers, right? Like these abilities that you're born with and that you have probably suppressed and repressed. And it is now the time that we're all opening up, awakening, becoming aware of what we're capable of. If you can see a little bit of yourself in Jessica's story, then perhaps you'll be opening yourself up to the possibilities of what could happen with you. Welcome, Jessica.
Hi, Valeria. I'm so excited to be here. How are you?
I'm amazing. I'm so excited to have you here as well. I want to hear all about your journey so that we can tell the audience that, one of my main reasons to bring you forward is so that, maybe they can find parts of themselves in your story. And then that will give them a little bit perhaps of belief in themselves so that they can feel okay that they're not alone, that this is not, it's not just them going through something, that we all go through stuff like this. So
Oh,
let's
yeah.
get started. Why don't you let us know a little bit about you? Like how did you get started with this, with becoming a psychic medium, tarot reader? Like how did that happen? Like where did you come from?
It's a very long origin story, kind of. It goes back years. So basically, I used to be in psychologically abusive relationships. I've only ever really been in two relationships. The first one was a guy who was really controlling and jealous and possessive, but he was my first boyfriend ever. And so I felt like I really needed to make it work with him because I really wanted to just spend my life with one person for the rest of my life. That was just what I wanted.
The conditioning, right? It's the
Oh,
conditioning of
yeah.
like you must have one person in your
Yeah.
life for the rest of your life, and then we believe in that, right? We want to do the best that we can on that. And so for you, for example, that you got a crappy relationship and the first one, you're like trying to make it work because that's what you were told, right?
Yeah, but the thing is I didn't even like the guy. I didn't have very good boundaries and I didn't know how to speak up for myself very well. Basically, this guy continued to ask me out over and over and over again, and I kept saying no. And then eventually one day I was like, fine, we'll do like a 2-week dating trial. And then the next day, he changed his relationship status on Facebook to in a relationship with Jessica Kozlowski. And I was like, wow, I thought that dating and a relationship were two different things, but was too I didn't say anything about it. I wasn't strong enough at that point, I guess, to say anything, or I just chose not to say anything. So there I was in a relationship with a guy that I didn't want to be with for a year.
That's incredible. I did not know that part of your story. Like, he's just pretty much like, here I am.
Yeah. And then I fell in love with somebody else while I was with the first guy, which I guess makes sense because I didn't even like him. So, but this next guy I was on and off with for 6 years, and he's definitely a sociopath, a narcissist. I think also probably a psychopath, but the psychopathy didn't start showing up until towards the end of my relationship with him. I very, very much wanted this to work because I felt like he was the one for me. Like I wanted to spend the rest of my life with this person, but he was also very much a gaslighter. Everything was always my fault. He had a reason for everything, and I just couldn't see it. And of course, my family and friends hated the guy. They could see things that I couldn't see or that I refused to see. Eventually, I moved to upstate New York to be with this guy to try to make things work because we had like not contacted each other for like a year. And he contacted me and he was like, "I'm sorry, I still love you." And I'm like, "Oh, I just want to be friends." And then I told my parents that we were just going to be friends. And then they were really upset about me being friends with him at all. And that kind of pushed me towards talking to him more because now I didn't have the support around me. And now he was the only one who supported what I wanted to do, which was like to make my own decisions and have connections with people that like on my terms, I decided I wanted to be friends with him. And
Through the whole time that, your family, your friends really dislike this for you, did you have any inner thoughts, feelings, ideas? Did you have any insights like that coming in for you?
yeah, probably. Because like the music, I remember specifically the music he would listen to, it always really bothered me because the lyrics in the songs he would listen to were things about being a monster and being like a ladies' man and blah blah blah. And I remember bringing up to him a couple times like do you listen to this music because you can relate to it? And he was like, No, I just like the way it sounds, and I'm like, I had a really hard time wrapping my brain around that because like I usually listen to music that I relate to at a soul level. So, but that happened over and over and over again where I'm listening to these songs that he's playing all the time, and now looking back, I'm like, we definitely could relate to those songs.
That's as growing up as a good child, like following the rules and all that, you really don't want to hear your parents tell you anything, right? So you kind of have like this part of like rebel against them, and just because they're saying it, you're not going to listen to it. But I had so many friend signs that came to me. So that's why I was asking you, like, because for me, it was more of my guides, which I was not aware it was my guides or my intuition back then. But it was a lot. And now looking back, it's like, whoa, like I really just blew my guides over, over and over and over. So that's what I was asking you. I was curious if you had, a lot of insights or a lot of messages like that coming for you as well.
So I know that for like my entire life, I did not know that I was a psychic medium. And even when I was told that I was a psychic medium, I was very excited about it, but I also kind of didn't believe them because I was like, but nothing is happening for me. Nothing is coming through. It's just me. And now I'm like, oh, my thoughts actually are probably my guides because it sounds like my own thoughts, but it's probably also just them giving me information or giving me insight, but I just don't know how to tell the difference,
Do you
or
still feel
didn't.
this way that you can tell the difference, or is this how you felt at the beginning when they told you, "Hey, you're a kick"?
It depends on this. Sometimes it's really obvious where something shows up in my brain and it's like it's like an explosion and I'm like, well, like this makes a lot of sense. I think that those times when I have a thought or a message that is like it just kind of comes out of nowhere and it makes a lot of sense. I think those are the times when it's my guides coming through, and then there are other times where I'm just thinking, and basically if I feel like I'm just going down a rabbit hole, then obviously it's not them. But it's interesting that what were you saying about the messages? So that's another thing too is this guy was, or maybe still is, an atheist. He even told me that my cat at the time didn't actually love me, that I was just her provider and I gave her food and water. And so she did what she needed to do, which actually sounds a lot like him now that I think about it. Yeah, sounds a lot like him, where you're the one who's providing. And so they're showing you love because you are giving them what they need to survive, which at the time was also true for him because he was living with me for free. So interesting.
Oh, that's incredible. Putting those two things together. Because, we are each other's reflections, right? We are our mirrors. So if he's seeing that on your cat for you, that's his own reflection of like, hey, this is what I'm doing without being able to see that he's talking about himself. That's really deep.
Yeah, and I remember being really disappointed and being like, well, there's no way that her name was Kittle. I was like, there's no way Kittle doesn't love me. Like, well, that does it just didn't make any sense to me. So I really struggled with that. And honestly, if I were still with the guy today, I would not be where I am at right now because I would have been too afraid of stepping out of this cage, basically, where he's like, God isn't real or this and this, and he like makes fun of people who believe in those kinds of things. He basically uses logic to disprove Jesus and God and the Bible and stuff like that. He even told me a story where he seemed really proud of like he used to work with this one guy and he would have conversations with this guy about the Bible and God, and this guy was a very devout Christian, and he got to the point where this guy literally stopped showing up to work because he was having this internal crisis because the guy I was with had had really gotten into his brain and was like he started believing the things that he was being told by my ex. And then his boss ended up telling my ex to tell the guy that he was just kidding so that he would come back to work.
Wow, the power of that. Let me ask you a question. Because you mentioned, if I had still been with him, I wouldn't be where I am right now. How did you actually break free from that relationship? Because there's so many women who get themselves into that position of being with someone who is abusive, verbally abusive, narcissist, and makes them feel as if there's something wrong with them, they're not good enough, and then that belief, as you describing him being so powerful that the coworker like didn't want to go to work. Imagine being in the relationship and feeling like this is the most I can do. And without this person, I'll be alone forever. Obviously, because the person's probably letting them know that, right? Or like trying to manipulate that. So how did you break free from that relationship?
So keep in mind at this time he was living with me in upstate New York, and then he just like was showing up less and less, and he was talking about this one girl in particular a lot, and had suspicions about it. And one day he called me. Of course, it's a phone call because remember we lived together,
Mhm.
and told me he wanted to see other people. And I was devastated, but I was like, I guess I'm going to continue to stay up here because maybe we just need some time apart. And then 2 weeks later, he called me and told me that he got married. I suspect that when he called me and told me he wanted to see other people is actually when he got married.
Mm.
And he refused to tell me who he had gotten married to. And of course, I suspected who it was, and I was right about it. So at that point, when he said he got married, that's when I was like, I guess there's no reason for me to stay here anymore. And so I contacted my family and I told them what happened, and they told me to come home. So yeah, I moved back in with my parents, and that was the whole experience was really, really, really difficult because I had spent at that point 2 years in upstate New York trying to put things back together and make things work and have the love that he told me we could have.
So here's a question. Because you said I suspected who the other person was, and I was right. So I want to go back to that part because that's probably your intuition, right? Like, and so many of us know these things. If you've ever been cheated on before, if you've ever had this type of relationship, you probably know that it's happening. You know who it's with or the extent of it somehow, right? It's deep within. It's just our mind that is preventing us from seeing it clearly. So, when you said that, like, do you feel like where did you that knowing of like who he was? Can you connect it now that you are doing this work professionally, that you're able to like say put it together and say, hey, like I knew who it was and I was right, and I got that information through fill in the blank.
I mean, yeah, I believe it was definitely my intuition, and it was interesting because I did eventually find out who it was, like as a confirmation when I was already living back in Pennsylvania, and I saw his friends list on Venmo or something, and the girl had a last name that very clearly did not belong to her, and it was his last name. And I was like, so it was her for sure. But yeah, so I've grown into this person who realizes I should definitely trust those gut feelings 1,000%. Like someone can tell me any reason, like like I said, the reasons he gave me for everything, every time I brought up a concern or like a suspicion, he always had a reason or something to like blow out that flame, if that makes sense. The flame being me being suspicious and me finally catching on to something. And then he would have a reason, and I would be like, it could be a legitimate reason. And of course, I chose to believe it.
Okay, so now you're back with your parents, and now
Yeah.
you're rebuilding your life, and you went to a psychic, and
Yeah.
they told you that you were a psychic medium. So tell us a little bit about that experience.
So after 4 years of being single, it was like the day or two before Valentine's Day in 2021, and I was on Facebook, and there was an advertisement on my newsfeed that was like, I can draw your soulmate. And it was on sale for $20, originally 200, and I'm like, that sounds like a scam. But I'm still really curious about it, so I ended up going on Etsy. I picked one, and I paid for it, and I got in an email a sketch of the person and a few paragraphs of a description of what our relationship would be like whenever we finally did meet and we were finally together. And so far, it has not happened. But the point is, I was reading it. It was the first time in 4 years that I actually believed that maybe there was somebody out there for me. And then I became really curious about psychics. So I started going down this rabbit hole on the internet about psychics and mediums and crystals and Reiki and chakras and everything metaphysical that I could possibly find. And I was like, I want to learn all of the things right now, every single thing, but I don't know where to start. And I can't learn everything right now. Like, that's not realistic. So, yeah, and tarot. So I ended up signing up for a tarot class with somebody whose podcast I listened to. It was kind of an expensive tarot class, but it was definitely worth it. I have absolutely made the money back since then with everything that I was taught in that class.
Amazing. And that's such a That's such an important part of like the story of like going down the rabbit hole because really there once you go down there, there is like so many multitudes of paths that you can go down and it's like, oh my God, oh my gosh, oh my gosh. And like every single thing is like it resonates and you don't know what else is there, right? And also, to your credit, you made that investment on your first tarot card class that opened you up, and it was like your first class to teach you how to tap into your own intuition. And like you said, it has paid you 10 times over already. So, I wanted to ask you if you had any type of fears or any type of constrictions within your body when you were to spend your first investment in something to learn about the metaphysical. Because when I first paid somebody, I had never spent money on myself on something that I didn't know what the results were going to be, and when you're investing on yourself on something that's like this, like metaphysical, you have no idea where it's going to take you. And I think that was one of the biggest fears for me. It was like, I was so scared to do it. But, I had my job, I had my work, and I had my own money that I could spend. I didn't have to like explain to anyone. So I had that freedom. But for you, and I know a lot of people go through that, like when they first hire somebody to help them go down that path. So did you have any constrictions yourself about like investing in yourself so that you can learn more from a specific person that you were like perhaps admiring or feeling connected to?
So the tarot class actually cost, I think it was $600, and that was the COVID pricing,
Hmm.
because that was about almost a year since COVID had started. So in a way, that kind of worked out for me. But the way I found the class was I was listening to a spiritual podcast, and there are two co-hosts, and the one co-host is a psychic medium, and I really, really admired her. I was like, this woman is legit. She's amazing. She's so connected. I want to learn from her. So I looked her up and then I invested in the class. And I think it was a couple of months, like the class was starting a couple of months after I signed up because it was a virtual live class. It wasn't like something where you would have like a self-paced kind of a class. Oh, but I also remember like how I was back then. I really was very much not connected to my intuition. I really did not believe in my abilities. I had also been told by another reader that I was going to be a medium. He didn't say psychic medium. He said I was going to be a medium, and I was very, very, very excited. But I was like, I do not know how to do that. I kind of didn't even believe him. So I took this class and I was so, so invested in it. She led us through week by week. We would just take the deck piece by piece and start working with it. And I remember because I was struggling so much with connecting to my intuition and I really felt like I had no idea what I was doing with the cards, I downloaded an app to try and help me with piecing the cards together like that. And of course, when I asked her about it, I was like, I downloaded this app, and she was really upset about me downloading this app because she wanted me to use my intuition. And I'm like, but at the time, I didn't understand what that was. I remember not knowing what intuition was. I was like, I don't understand what this is, but it was a learning experience for both of us because I apologized. I'm like, I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to offend you. And she was like, that's okay because I'm still learning too. Like, I'm learning how to interact with people who are interested in learning these things. And she's like, I'm just so passionate about it and I love it so much. So, everything's fine.
That's such an important part of your story because when we're first starting going down that rabbit hole and we're looking at podcasts and reading and videos and all of that, and then we finally trust someone to teach us, to take us further, to really show us where we're going in this. And then when we still don't feel completely aligned or trusting in our own abilities, like you downloaded this app. I mean, that's just part of your learning process. And I just wanted to bring this out and bring some light because it's so important that you share that with your mentor, and that after she was like at the first part a little bit like turned off about it, then she was like, hey, I'm also just learning. I'm also learning how to help people. And that is gives you the validation that, hey, like you follow your intuition to download something else and get a little bit more help for yourself so that you can understand it better and bring it in to make sense of it all with the person, with the program, with the new app, so that it works for you. And what I guess what I really want to highlight here is Don't be afraid to just go your own way. Even if the person that you've hired or that you're working with is like so amazing or you're really feeling connected, if while you're doing that, you feel the pull or the hint to do something else in conjunction, go ahead because only you know what's going to work for you. Only you know what's going to be the best way for you to integrate all the information that's coming towards you. So I just wanted to point that out because a lot of people feel afraid of their mentor, and that's also part of the conditioning, right? Like, don't talk back. Now as adults, as we're investing in ourselves so that we can grow and see where this can go for us, we still have that part running in the background that is like, I need to do exactly what they're saying, or I'm going to offend them, and that's no longer valid. It's no longer serving us, I should say. It's not part of the way that things are working out for us right now. So I'm so thankful that you share that part of your story because it's so powerful that, hey, here I am learning, yet I still have my own me. This is what I feel like doing, and I'm going to do that, right?
Yes. So the thing is, like, now that I'm more experienced with all of this, I understand why an app is probably not the best way to go. My thought process back then was, oh, the app is going to know which meanings of these cards connect with each other. But now that I've been doing this for a couple of years for other people, that's not actually how it works. That's why the intuition part is so important. So an app is fun. Of course, it's fun to use. It's fun. You can use it as a learning tool, but the actual giving a reading to someone and trying to decipher whatever message is in your spread is definitely an intuition thing that cannot be replicated with technology.
Yeah, I agree. But I mean, it's a tool. It's a tool that you can have to give you that confidence so that you can really make sense in your studying as you opened up to your own intuition. I mean, I remember when I first started reading cards, I was so scared, number one. I was like, I don't know if I can do this. And I would just pull up a card and then literally read the description on the booklet. Like, that's how I was pulling cards. That's exactly what I was doing. And I was doing it because I didn't have enough trust that, oh my gosh, this is so scary. Like, what if I get it wrong? So I was just like, hey, here's your card. Here's what the book says it means. And I was doing that. And that was a tool that I used to get myself that trust. And then it turned out that as I kept doing this, all of a sudden I was just like, I would pull a card and I would just talk to the person. And then I'll be like, oh, uh, let me check what the book says just in case. And then it was the same thing or it was very similar. And I was like, that was the tool that got me out of my box of being able to tune even more into my intuition to serve others. So, I mean, I wouldn't discount it so much. I mean, yeah, it's a digital thing, but it really does help in opening us up to our next level, right?
Yes, absolutely. Even now I don't just use cards, like I have crystals and everything. I use I have a pendulum. Sometimes the pendulum works, sometimes it doesn't. And I think the times it doesn't is when spirit is like, no, use your intuition, not the pendulum.
So trust more in yourself as opposed to
Yeah.
leaning on the tool that we've given you so that you can trust yourself.
Yeah, they're like, hey, no, you can definitely do this. You don't need the pendulum.
Good, good. Amazing. So now that you took the class and then what, you started doing readings right after that? Or like where did it take you?
So I was mainly practicing for myself, and I remember in the very beginning, I think the first reading I ever gave for someone else was for my best friend, and it was not that great. It was
My
not.
first thing that I did for someone when I was practicing was also not that great. Just to put it out there, okay? For anyone who's
Yeah.
trying this out, my first one was I called it a total disaster. And my second one, I was like, okay, stop thinking of everyone else on how they do it and just bring in your inner knowing and just deliver. And the second one was incredibly amazing. It's all about that mistrust. The first time we do it is that mistrust of like, what did I see so and so do? And how do they do it? And what do I like? All of those thoughts that are external instead of tuning into your own knowing as you are receiving those messages. So you're good.
Yeah, so eventually it was reading. I was mainly reading for myself. And even now that's still hard. It's difficult for me to decipher what the cards mean for me, sometimes not all the time. But then eventually here's another like really roundabout way of getting to where I am today. Eventually, I had to leave my parents' house and find a place to live on my own. So I did. So with me living on my own, like that allowed me to really start to explore more of me without worrying about, I guess, what my family thought about things. And eventually I went to a what's it called? Dorney Park, which is like it's what's an amusement park with my sister and my niece. And my niece at the time was, I don't know, probably like 5, and I get motion sickness on roller coasters. So, but I really wanted to be able to go on these roller coasters with my niece. So I started looking up ways to deal with motion sickness, and one of the ways was hypnosis. So I looked up hypnosis practitioners near me, and I got matched with one who is now my coach, and she is also psychic, and she knew that I was psychic, and I'm still like I'm working on and off with her, but she's the one who pushed me to start going and reading at expos, which was absolutely terrifying. I felt like an imposter. I felt like a fraud. I'm like, I am charging these people to give them readings, and I am not a professional. I was doing this as a hobby. This is I just was like I said, I was so scared. I felt like I was gonna throw up, but I did well. I was giving accurate readings to people. There was one lady I had who really threw me off because every time I would ask her if something made sense, she kind of was like, "I guess." And I was like, "I don't understand." Like everybody else was getting accurate readings, and now this woman sitting in front of me is telling me that things are not quite resonating, and I kept pulling more cards and more cards. And I felt regret that she had left my booth with a what I thought was a mediocre reading. But when I talked to a couple of my psychic friends after that, they were like, "No, you were definitely spot on with the reading, and she probably just didn't want to hear it, or maybe she wasn't allowing herself to see."
Yeah. Yeah, that's so important too. So talk about like just jumping off a cliff and like here I am live with people. Like, wow, that's like must have been so scary.
It was interesting because I had literally like 36 hours notice that I was doing this. It was a Thursday, and I just happened to have off on November 11th, 11/11,
Uh-huh.
and that's the day when I went out and I bought tablecloths and uh I made business cards. I went and bought signage. I went and bought poster frames. I bought so many things just to prepare for November 12th, which was the first day of this expo. I was only doing it for that Saturday because the guy who needed another vendor only had an opening for Saturday because he had somebody for Sunday. So I was there for just Saturday. And I was really stepping outside of my comfort zone. I was not planning on going and doing readings for other people for at least another 3 to 5 years. Like, this is how ready I felt. I was not ready. I did not feel ready at all. But my coach said I could do it. So I did.
Amazing. I love that because, okay, so many things, so many things about what you just said. Number one, you were like, I'm not ready for that. Like it'd be like 3, 5 years because I'm not ready. I don't know enough. And that again, it's the programming. I need to study this many years in order to become good or be worthy of doing that type of work. Right. So that's the condition. And she's like, hey, this is in 2, 3 days. And you're like, wow, like, okay, I'll do it, right? So it's like following the intuition, following the guidance that you're receiving, and taking action. And when everything is aligned, everything happens quickly. Everything happens quickly. So you're moving forward with what your coach is telling you to do, even though you have all this fear and you just do it. And then how do they go?
Good. I mean, even honestly, it took a few expos of me feeling like an imposter and a fraud to actually believe that I was not,
Hmm.
because I had given so many readings where people were like, "Oh, wow, that was amazing," or "That was great," or "You were spot on," or "You really zeroed in on this." And I'm like, "Really?
Yeah,
Are you
I
sure?"
love that. So I want to just bring a little bit about that to the audience because we each have our own gifts, our own abilities that we're able to tune into in different unseen realms, and they are so natural to us. It's just like breathing. Like you don't have to think about breathing, right? And so they're so natural that it does feel like, what am I doing? where am I getting this information from? That imposter syndrome is so common. Like I have so many clients who are like, that's the main thing. Like, and I've had that too, right? Like, whoa, like where did I get that information? And it is only through action. So just like what you had to do is the action of like, okay, I'm gonna do it. And then getting that confirmation from a total stranger, that's the only thing that's going to, in my view, that's going to allow you to really trust yourself, trust that you are doing the right thing and that it's real. Like when I first started, I had been doing healings for many years, like here and there, nothing constant because I was not going down the rabbit path yet. Um, and then every time the person would leave, I would tell myself, yeah, they just said that because they're my friends or because they know me. Like that didn't actually happen. This is just playtime. Like I didn't put anything together. I didn't talk to anyone about it. I didn't say anything to anyone. People were coming to me asking me for healings, and I would just do it. Like, yeah, sure. And then they would go away like feeling better, and I would be like, yeah, that didn't happen. And like every single time. And it wasn't until I was also working with a mentor, and it was a group mentorship thing. And one of the other participants said to me one time, come on, just go ahead and do it. We all know what you can do. Like, what are you still waiting for? And it was like a kick in the butt. And I was like, okay. And it was just like you. Like, she's like, just go and start offering things. So I did it online because this was also around COVID time. So nobody was going anywhere. So I put out like I was doing free healing reading things online, and my calendar filled up. And then except for the first one, which was horrible, after that, every single one was so dead on. And that's when I believed, because I was like, okay, these people I don't know. Like they don't know me. They're not friends. So why would they say that was great or you're spot on? Like why would they say that if they're complete strangers? So and that's when I believed. So that's when I actually believed that I had something. So important to start doing that.
What's cool is like I do finally believe that I have something, which is like finally, right?
Yeah.
And something new happened this past weekend because I just finished an expo in Allentown, and there were two people in particular, and it was on Saturday specifically, where I noticed my throat was uncomfortable and I had to keep clearing it and it was dry and I was just having a hard time talking, and I'm like, maybe I'm actually tuning into this person's throat chakra. And so I asked them, remember, two different people, two different readings. I was like, do you have a hard time speaking up for yourself? And they were like, yes. And I'm like, well, that explains a lot because I'm having a really hard time communicating things. Everything just feels really uncomfortable and I have to keep clearing my throat. So I'm still growing. I'm still discovering new things about me now that I'm opening up and like I guess releasing the blockages of self-doubt. More things are happening and the readings are becoming better and they're more accurate. And that's the thing too, is it's one of the hardest things to work through is this self-doubt when you think that you can't do something and then you're blocking yourself because you're telling yourself you can't do it, but you want to be able to do it. And that's also kind of part of taking a leap of faith, and just if you got to pretend, you just pretend like, oh yes, I definitely know what I'm doing. So that
And
you
then you
can
have the
get through it.
confirmation from the other person telling you like, yeah, you do.
Yes.
Amazing. So let's go into the mediumship, because you said that the psychic said that you were going to be a medium. And I know I've worked with you as well. And I've also told you that, hey, your mediumship stuff's coming up here. How has that come up for you? Have you explored it? Have you been able to communicate? Have you done any mediumship readings yet? How is that going?
I did have a couple this past weekend, and I'm still very much not confident about the mediumship readings because I keep thinking that it's supposed to come to me in a particular way, and that's not necessarily the case. But I know for me, when I have spirits show up, they kind of show up as like cartoon characters. They don't look like real people to me. They show up as cartoon characters, which I think is, and you've told me this before, I think it's a way of them trying to show up in a way that's not going to scare me. And I'm like, well, why would I be scared? But then there was another time where I was doing a mediumship practice and somebody showed up but they were much more real looking and it scared me. It startled me. And I'm like, wait, no, 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 no. No, this is what we want. We want this. This is exactly what we want. We don't have to be scared. So it's a little bit difficult at this time for me to get like full long sentences, but I anticipate that I'll be able to do that one day with enough practice. But for now, what I get is the images of these people as like cartoon characters. And if there are no images of these people, it's more of like feeling who they are, at least who they are in the spirit world. So I was able to describe someone's mom, I think yesterday, and I described her as she was like very flowy and elegant and patient, and she was like a goddess. And I'm like, does that sound like someone to you? And she was like, oh yeah, that's my mom. I'm like, great. I was really
Amazing.
hoping.
I love the way that you described it, like you see it as cartoon characters, because yeah, that is one of the blockages that I've seen a lot, is that when we first start going down the rabbit hole and we know there's something else for us and we know we may have abilities, because we all do, or gifts, spiritual gifts, and then we're looking at others. How do they receive so that I can receive the same way, right? And then when we don't receive the same way, then we're like, I'm wrong, or I don't have it, or that's just for some people. Where in reality, we each one of us receives in our own unique way. So like you're the first person that I've spoken with that says they show themselves to me as cartoon characters, because that's how I feel comfortable. So they show you through something that you're able to connect and able to see and be open to it, right? When I see a lot of times I see people with like neon lights creating a type of like outline of the person. So I see that, which is also different, right? And many other people have other ways. So just being open to like, hey, I'm just going to be open to receive, and then allow whatever comes through for you so that you can actually receive your own messages. Because as long as we're tuning in, like if I was like looking at you, Jessica, and I was like, okay, cartoon characters, and let me try to connect. I don't see any cartoons, and then I'm missing completely the way that I receive, because I don't receive cartoon characters. I receive it in a different way. And if I'm tuned into you, like, okay, Jessica said, that's how she receives, and I'm trying to see the cartoons that you see, I'm never going to be able to connect to my own intuition and my own spiritual gifts, because I'm trying to do it as you do it instead of the way that comes through naturally for me.
Yeah, and I think it's also important for people to be aware as they're exploring this themselves that there are things that you might just pass off as a coincidence, but something I've learned is there's no such thing as a coincidence. So
Mm-hmm.
if you're seeing repeating numbers all the time, I remember when I was working with my coach in the very beginning, I eventually brought up, I was like, I see a lot of repeating numbers. And she was like, yeah, so she said, you keep telling me that nothing is happening, and yet you are having things happen and you're just not realizing that the things are happening. Or at some point, also in the same period of time, I would see little shadows in my peripheral vision.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, maybe that's something too. And she's like, yeah, that's your mediumship. I'm like, okay. And then there were times where I would feel like little tingliness down towards my legs that to me felt like maybe a cat was walking by, but there was no cat. And she's like, yeah, that's something too. I think she called it like brownies or like the little spirits, like not fairies, but if that makes sense, I don't even know. I don't understand that part yet.
Yeah, so that's really amazing, right? As we become tuned into one thing, right? And then you allow yourself to immerse yourself there, you practice it, you share your gifts with others, and then that's when other things begin to open up, right? It's like, because like you said, like you were doing a reading this weekend and now you're tuning into the person's throat chakra block being black, right? So that's part of you being able to also heal them. So it really does feel like that comes in your near future of being able to actually read the person's energy and be able to release the blockage of their energy center or their chakras. So that all happens because we are allowing ourselves to trust and believe in that one thing that interests us the most when we started going down the rabbit hole. And there's no mistakes, there's no right or wrong, there's any way that we feel like that's the way I'm going to go and start, or this is the way that I start like learning here, or that's the person. There's no mistakes, they're always there for to be your initiator, to be your path into the rabbit hole, to be the one that expands you, or whatever it is in your path.
I also want to point out something about when you are beginning to experience things and you share them with other people. I will say there was one person when I shared my excitement over seeing the shadows in my peripheral vision. This person said, no offense, Jess, but that I think is a symptom of psychosis. I'm like, honestly, I was really upset about that because I'm like, well, I thought it's mediumship. It's got to be mediumship. I'm not going through some kind of like mental uh experience, I guess if you want to call it that. And so I want people to understand that there are people maybe who are uncomfortable with the things that you're doing or the things that you're experiencing, and they might try to apply logic to it, but just don't allow people to, I guess, dull your sparkle. Don't allow them to dull your light because I've definitely allowed that a lot over the last couple of years, and I'm finally learning how to set those boundaries and how to not allow those people to bother me.
That's so important. I call it the 3D world or the 3D people and the 5D. So the 3D is the like human work 9 to 5, have a 4 year degree. I get to work, I get paid. 5D is like I feel, I know. It's an inner knowing, perhaps because you brought that inner knowing from several past lives into the now, and this is why it's all flourishing, and you're just filled with knowledge that just comes up. Is your intuition. And I had something happen this morning. It was really funny. I For some reason I woke up really early and I looked at the time and literally it said 5:40. I thought, no, 6:40. It says 6:40. And I was like, oh my gosh, the alarm didn't go off. So I run to my son's room. I open the curtains. I'm waking him up. He's like, what's going on? What's going on? And I'm like, cuddling him like, oh, I'm so sorry. It's time to get up. You forgot to put your alarm clock. And he's like, Mommy, it's 5 o'clock. And I looked at the clock in his room and it says 5:20. And I'm like, that can't be. That has to have stopped. So I grab his watch, which is digital, and I'm like, and he said 5:20. And I'm like, is that possible? Because when I got up in my bedroom, it was 6:40. And I got up really fast and just went next in the next room, and it's now 5:20, right? So I'm like, it's nothing was messed up, and I'm like, it just happened, right? So I'm like, okay, I'm sorry. So I close the curtains, come back into my room, like, what just happened? So I told the story to some other friend who is 5D or is into exploring this type of life, and they were like, wow, like that's so cool, and trying to like tune into that. I tell this to a 3D person, and they're like, yeah, I don't know what you're doing, but it's obviously not working for you. And I was like, what? That makes no sense whatsoever. But like that's the difference of when you start down this path of finding and sharing what you're going through with someone who is really not open to the metaphysical and someone who is. Like those are the types of answers you're going to receive. And it's going to be like completely shut you down or completely open you up into wonder.
Yeah, and I think it's also really important to kind of respect people's opinions, even if they're like if it's 3D, like you can't push someone into believing what you believe. Like, yes, it could be amazing and it can make your quality of life better and all those things, but they need to kind of go at their own pace. If they ever decide to open themselves up to the metaphysical or to spirituality or to the energies or anything like that, that's entirely up to them. But I also think like it's important to set healthy boundaries. If somebody feels the need to kind of put you down, maybe they're weirded out or they feel threatened or something, you need to also make sure that you preserve yourself and preserve your wonder and your curiosity. And at the same time, though, I believe that the universe throws challenges at us, and then those people could also just be people who are challenging us and seeing like, are we ready for that next step?
Yeah, well, as above, so below. There's always an opposite in everything that we're living through. Yeah, you're right. I mean, if somebody came to you talking to you about mediumship or tarot reading 5 years ago, you might have been one of those people, right? Like looking at them like that's kind of crazy or not real or whatever, right?
Yeah, you know what? Actually, I think back to this one conversation I had back when I kind of missed this part when I was not when I did not believe that there was anybody out there for me. At that point, for like 4 years, I believed that there was no God. My thought process was, if there was a God, he would not have allowed any of these awful, horrible things to happen to me. And now I'm like, so there were a lot of signs. I just ignored them. And some of those signs came in the form of people telling me all these things that they thought were fishy or suspicious or that they saw and that I just disbelieved. But I remember having a conversation with this guy and he asked me, "Do you believe in God?" And I said, "No." And he's like, "Why not?" And I said, "Because how could God let all of these terrible, horrible things happen to me?" And he said, "Well, because everybody has free will." And I'm like, "Free will?" I had no idea. I did not understand it back then. And I understand it now. Like, yes, everybody has free will, and God or the universe or source is not going to step in and interfere with that. That's one of our gifts is the free will.
Yeah, I love that because I mean that is so common. You always hear, somebody going down a path that is really challenging in this life. And then the first thing is there is no God. How could it be? Because all of these terrible things happen either to me or are happening in the world. And that it's such a big separation of the divine and ourselves, of that belief that the divine or God has to be someone out there who's in charge. And if bad things are happening, then that means it's their fault they're making. And I'm completely obsolete from it. I have nothing to do with this, right? I haven't done anything wrong. So if bad things are happening to me, then it must be something else, someone outside of me, someone bigger than me who's making these things happen. And yeah, that cannot be a God. It has to be something bad or worse, or it's just non-existence, or it can't be because why would this happen? Whereas now, when we are tuning into this and we're having that connection of like, hey, we are connected to that divine pure love, and it is our choice to put our energy into seeing everything that can happen for us and how it happens for us in a perfectly divine way, as opposed to putting that finger blaming outwards, which is like, I'm separate, I have nothing to do with what's going on over there. It's happening to me, instead of changing it to, that was happening for me. It happened for me so I could wake up. It happened for me so I could be where I am right now. It happened for me so I can expand in consciousness.
Yes.
How does that
I
feel?
mean,
Yeah.
that was something that took a lot of time for me to really, I guess, integrate
Mhm. It's a
because,
hard one.
yeah, yeah. I mean, even with things that like I've experienced recently, it's like, well, how is this possibly happening for me? Because it feels pretty freaking terrible. It feels pretty bad. So how is this happening for me? And now I'm like, okay, so this is happening for me because I need to learn how to stop taking the things that people say and believe to heart and actually be happy with myself exactly as I am because there is nothing wrong with me. I am where I'm supposed to be. I am who I'm supposed to be. And of course, there's always things for me to work on, but I'm happy with who I am right now. And I'm not going to allow other people to make me feel like I am less than I am.
Yeah, yeah. I love that. I love that. It's really, I find it really difficult, especially if someone has gone through some really traumatic tragedies, like losing a child or losing their home through like some type of a weather thing or something like that, right? That is huge, and not being able to see the good in it, right? Because it's like really people are like, what do you mean good from this? Like there's nothing good from that. And we're not able to see that there's something else bigger, right? And it's happening for us for whatever it is that we have chosen to come here and learn. And also, the more that we do this work and the more that we get closer to firmly believing in ourselves, in what we do, in what we're able to do, then that is when other people can say things and it no longer affects us. Like this person this morning, like said that, and I was like, okay, like that's weird. And like to me, it didn't make any sense. Like I don't know what they meant by it. And I'm not going down that place to say, what did they mean? I'm not feeling bad about it because it's like, well, they didn't get it, like, and I go on. But that same comment 2 years ago, 3 years ago, it would have put doubt on myself, like, oh, am I going crazy? Psychosis, right? Like all of that, it will put doubt on us, and that's a natural path of going down the rabbit hole, is that we do have people in our lives presenting us with the challenge of, no, that's not true. No, you're crazy. No, that's not a good thing. Or that's evil, or whatever it is that's coming at you from, the people around you. It is just reinforcing it for you. Like, okay, you have a choice here, right? Do you want to go back to where you were and believe that? Or is this really like a fire within you that you cannot let go, and you have to continue to serve and see where it takes you? And then you'll get to a point where, like, people would say things, the same exact things they would have said in the years prior, and it will not affect you because you're so grounded in your own knowing and your own belief of what is true for you.
Yes, 1000%.
Amazing. It has been a really great conversation. Is there anything else you want to share with the audience? Anything you want to talk about, either like what to do, or how to get help if they're going down their own spiritual awakening, or anything else that you want to share about you at this time?
I think it's really important to have an open mind. And of course, having an open mind is a little bit difficult in the beginning because you're so used to things in the 3D world that trying to open up your brain to concepts of 5D just doesn't seem to make any sense. But I think you will make a much more progress and faster if you just allow yourself to believe that anything is possible, anything can happen. And it's also really helpful if you step back and look at the bigger picture instead of being really focused on the tiny details that are happening in your everyday life. Whoever's listening, there's nothing wrong with you. You're exactly where you're supposed to be. And everything you're going through is for a reason, even if it doesn't feel like it, even if it feels really hard and torturous. But I know even this past weekend, I gave readings to a few people where one of the messages is like, you're doing a lot of inner work and it might not feel like you're getting anywhere, and that's okay. You can choose to reevaluate your strategy. You can choose to keep going and doing the things that you're doing, but don't give up, because at this point, your option is to keep going or go back to who you were before. And going back to who you were before is not an option anymore. You're too far into this process for you to go back to that. So keep going.
Amazing. I love that message. I just rewatched The Matrix this past weekend. I had seen it way before, and I didn't really care for it. It didn't do much for me. I didn't get it at all. I mean, it was like a long time ago. And I just rewatched it because I was like, oh, it feels like this is something I need to watch now. And yeah, there was so many nuggets about this reality, the simulation, trusting in yourself. It was so many things. I would recommend you watching it again if you haven't watched it. But it is all about that. There was this one character, which is what made me think about it, and that knew everything, had gone down the rabbit hole, but just thought it was so hard and just wanted to get back to being in the place as they were before, without the knowledge, without the awakening, without the awareness. And they were having such a difficult time in the movie, right? And so now that you said that, I'm like, yeah, that makes sense, because this is the whole awareness and awakening is not an easy path, because you have to go through all your shadows. You have to face like what was holding you back before you actually get to be in that state of more bliss.
Yeah, I've actually never seen The Matrix, so now I should probably watch that.
Yeah, it was interesting. I like seeing it now from what I know now, and from having done this work for so many years now. It gives you a completely new perspective. And I've heard so many people in the spiritual world talking about The Matrix, like, hey, The Matrix was not a movie, a sci-fi, it was actually a documentary. And I heard this like many times. I'm like, yeah, what are they talking about? Right. And now that I'm in it, I'm like, yeah, like I have to watch that and see why they're saying. And there were so many nuggets about it, about, trusting yourself and what's available to us, because we are beautiful, powerful beings, just believing that we aren't, believing that we're just this body, believing that we're just this little person who has no power. And that comes from also the separation, that, the separation from the divine, that, there's something greater than us that isn't us. When in reality, we are all one. We are all that. is, which is where all of our psychic abilities and our intuition and all of our metaphysical abilities come from. There's one more thing that I just remember because you were talking about crystals, and I haven't had anyone talk about crystals in my podcast. So do you want to tell anything about that? Because I love crystals too.
I also really love crystals. I love rocks. I call them magic rocks. Anybody who doesn't understand, like, they're more like three-dimensional, and they ask me, why do you have all those crystals? I'm like, I like rocks. Like that's all I give them. I just say I like rocks. But even now in front of me, I have, my gosh, I think this is earth or a tree agate or something like that. I honestly cannot remember. I have a citrine point. I have so many things, and even sometimes I will just like catch the attention, or a crystal catches my attention across the room, and I'm like, I think that crystal wants to work with me. But like I have so many crystals, and I don't even use most of them, but they're really good at supporting you in your journey. So like when I do expos, I always bring selenite and black tourmaline. Selenite is very high vibe and clearing, and black tourmaline is very protective and grounding. I bring adriene as something to remove negative energy from my body. I have lately been meditating a little bit with blue apatite. It's funny, it sounds like appetite, like you're hungry, but it's not
Uh-huh.
that kind of appetite. And that one is good for like your upper chakras, your crown chakra, your third eye, and your throat. Um, but yeah, I just like they're all so pretty. And I think when people are like, well, how do you know which one to choose? How do you know which one you want to do? And it's like just whichever one you're drawn to. And you're like, what do you mean, whichever one I'm drawn to, whatever one I'm drawn to? It's just like if you think it's pretty, then you're drawn to it. Like you don't have to feel an energy from it. You don't need to be at that point yet. You can just be like, oh, this rock is really pretty. And honestly, if you think it's really pretty and you're attracted to it in that sense, and you Google the meaning or the metaphysical properties behind that crystal, I'm pretty much guaranteeing you that it's going to resonate in some way. Crystals, super pretty. Some of them are actually also really affordable, especially the more common ones. There are some more rare ones out there that are more expensive. And I want to say, be sure that you get your crystals from a reputable, I guess, crystal dealer, if you want to call it that, because unfortunately, there are companies out there who will try to kind of replicate the crystals. So, like moldavite in particular is an expensive crystal per gram. I think it's like $40 per gram. So, but there are people or companies out there who have molds, and they'll just dye glass green and they will sell it as moldavite. So I'm just saying, just like a little word of caution, for crystals that are generally more expensive, be mindful of the seller, but otherwise, most of the crystals you can definitely just go to a crystal store and just pick it up, and it'll be great. So just trust yourself. Just go. If you're interested in buying crystals, go somewhere, look at all the ones that you think are pretty and whatever you're drawn to, aka also whichever ones you think are pretty or whichever ones you think look cool are likely ones that are calling to you. They're asking you to work with them. They're like, pick me, take me home.
Crazy. I have here, this is my Celestine crystal.
Yes.
Yes, and I was so attracted to this. I don't remember where I heard about it or saw it, and I was like, I have to have it, and I had to go and find it. So this is like one of my favorite crystals. And I just love the name too. Celestine, it feels like celestial.
Yes. Yes, I do have one of those, I think, in my bedroom too. I don't really like play with it a lot. It just kind of sits on my nightstand because I feel like that's a good place for it to be. So,
Amazing. Awesome. All right. So Jessica, where can people find you if they want to work with you, if they want a reading from you, or where are the places they can find more
so
about
there's a
you?
lot of places. I actually just made a website, finally. Yeah, so it's jessicakozlowski.com. Jessica Kozlowski.com. You could also just Google me on Google. I have a business page. I also have TikTok and Facebook and Instagram. On Instagram and TikTok, it should be Psychic Medium Jess K, and Facebook is just Jessica Kozlowski Psychic Medium. So it's pretty much all the same thing. So yeah, if you want to reach out to me, I do mainly virtual readings, either over video call or over phone call. I also offer distance Reiki. I offer life coaching. I specialize in particular on like the self transformation and reframing your mind, and working more from the inside instead of trying to change things from I guess outside of you, if that makes sense, because it's kind of hard to change you can't change people. You can't change other people. You can only change yourself. You can work on yourself. So yeah, thank you.
Great. Yeah. And of course, I will put all of those handles on the description of this video. So you can just, if you didn't catch it, as Jessica was giving them all out, you can just go down into that area and look for all of her links and you can find it.
Yes.
So awesome. Thank you so much for being here today. I am so excited to have had you.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited. I never honestly thought I was ever going to be on your podcast, and I'm really, really glad that this is something that you decided to do, was to start, having other people on as guests. So thank you very much.
You're very welcome. Thank you, thank you, thank you. All right, guys, I will let you go, and I will talk to you next time. Bye-bye.